Hello, welcome to the Self-Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Unit 31, Post-Structuralism and Post-Modernism. And our topic is Jameson and Late Capitalism. Again, the postmodern thinkers reject the notion of a grand narrative or meta-narrative. For example, Lyotard constructs modern knowledge which has a grand synthesis. For example, the work of Parsons or Marx. Such narratives are associated with modern science. Thus, the Lyotard identifies modern knowledge with meta-narratives. Then obviously post-modern approaches demand that such theorizing should be negated in its completeness. This is because postmodern scholars such as Lyotard are not afraid to face the differences and challenges of such a viewpoint. Thus, postmodernism becomes an instrument that welcomes different perspectives under the same broad umbrella. Let us now turn to look at some examples of postmodern theory. A good illustration of the postmodern theory is clearly set out in the work of the Frederick Jameson. The point of departure is that modernity and postmodernity mark a radical break from each other and are hard to reconcile the two. However, a middle position is taken by the Jameson, who writes that there are some continuities between the two epochs. According to Jameson, capitalism is in its late stages, but continues to be the main form of the production the world over. However, this late stage of capitalism has been ushered in with postmodernism. Thus, while the cultural logic is altered, the underlying structure remains the same as in the incipient forms of capitalism. This is reflexive of the Marxian framework. Jameson sees the post-modern situation as possessing both positive and negative aspects of postmodernism. Thus, there is progress and chaos side by side. Thus, according to Jameson, there are three stages in the progress of capitalism. The first is market capitalism, typified by national markets. Following this phase comes the imperialistic stage, which is backed up by a global capitalist network. Then the third phase is the late capitalism. Share capital is used to commodify new areas. The effect of changes in the economic structure automatically create appropriate cultural changes. Thus, Jameson points out that we can see that realist culture is associated with market capitalism. Modernist culture is associated with monopoly capitalism. Post-modern culture and multinational capitalism. Jameson's perspective works mainly with a base and a superstructure model. According to Jameson, post-modern society has some characteristics. Firstly, there is superficiality. In the sense, the cultural products keep to superficiality and do not inquire deeply into the situation. For example, the soup cans and the portrait of the Marilyn Monroe. both of which are simulcast as they are a copy of a copy. Both paintings were painted from a copy of a photographs. Thus, the picture for the simulacrum, in which one cannot distinguish the original from the copy. These paintings are simulacrum and lack in depth and covers the surface meanings only. Further, emotion or emotionality is hardly to be found in the post-modern societies. Thus, alienation has been supplanted by fragmentation, which results in the impersonalization of interaction. Again, and thirdly, historicity is set aside, and it is clear that all that can be known about the past is textual and can spawn intertextuality at the most. What this implies is that the postmodernists do not restrict themselves to a single linear past, but pick the choose from among the available styles. That is to say, there is a strong element of pastic. This implies that truth about the past history is that we have no way of knowing what happened. The historians then have to be satisfied with the past, which in itself may not reflect much of the past reality, and there is no such thing as linear historical development. Finally, postmodernism has a new technology available to it, especially those which were not present earlier in the computers and other electronic machines. What we can say then is that the post-modern societies are in deep flux and great confusion, and many symptoms of these have appeared, especially with regard to certain kinds of affliction. Thus, whole new breeds of psychiatrists are busy trying to undo the stress and tension that postmodernism is clearly associated with. Thus, there is a problem of chaotic and disturbing trends of late capitalism. It is difficult to cope with multinational economy and the according cultural impact of consumerism. Jameson feels that the cognitive maps are needed to deal with post-modern realities. The maps can be put together by artists, novelists, and working people. Thus, Jameson's schema tries to build bridges between the Marxian theory and the postmodernism, but ended up antagonizing both Marxist and the postmodernists. This was to be expected because, despite Jameson's efforts to synthesize, it was clear that a grand theory or meta-narrative was unlikely to bend backwards, and therefore Jameson uses mainly its base or superstructure dichotomy. Jameson's postmodernism does try to maintain some basic or tenuous link between Marxism theory, despite the fact that the Marxism is a grand narrative. However, in the case of Jean Baudrillard, postmodernism is presented as a maverick social theory of contemporary times. Thus, Rhodland journey of ideas commences in the 1960s, which he started out as a Marxist critic of consumer society. He was influenced by both linguistic and semiotic. However, he soon left this orientation behind him and abandoned both Marxism and Structuralism. Now let us wind up the session and take rest. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with the Self Learning Podcast.